Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I want to talk tonight about endings. And I want to talk about endings for a couple of reasons. Tomorrow, we will complete the book of Exodus. We read the final chapters in the book of Shemot. That's one ending. And in the Parsha tomorrow, we read about the completion of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, of the portable home for God, the home for God that the Israelites built so that God could dwell with them and travel with them throughout their journey in the desert. And I want to talk about endings because endings are a big part of life. And endings have been on my mind a lot lately. 9 months ago, I sat in the hospital and watched my father die. So I've been thinking about endings a lot lately, and about their power, and about the significance of endings. And in this week's Torah portion, we have a powerful illustration for what an ending can be. The Israelites have been wandering in the desert. They've been lost, they've been scared, but they've been working together on building the Mishkan and building the tabernacle. In this act of creation, the Israelites have mimicked God. We are told by the tradition that we are all created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And this means that we have an obligation, that we have a duty to recognize the humanity in those around us and in ourselves. But this also means that, like God, we have the ability to create. And in fact, we find that the language used in the conclusion of this text intentionally echoes the language used in the creation story. We are told at the end of the creation narrative in the second chapter of the book of Genesis, "Thus were completed the heavens and the earth and all their host, and God completed on the seventh day God's work which God had done." And in our Parsha, in chapter 39 of the book of Exodus, we find language that intentionally mirrors the same structure. "Thus was completed all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, and the children of Israel did according to all the Lord commanded, and Moses completed the work." And in both of these cases, we find that immediately following the descriptions of the endings, we were given a commandment about Shabbat. We were given a commandment to rest, to step back, to notice what has just been created. But I want to take this beyond just the realm of linguistic parallels. I think that there's something deeper happening here. We are told that God also grapples with endings and what it means for us to have endings. This tells us that endings are an inevitable and a big part of life. And I want to use the completion of the Mishkan, I want to use this particular ending, this particular pause, as a paradigm for examining how we can approach endings in our own lives. And I want to do this by looking at 3 different midrashim, 3 different teachings from the rabbis addressing this topic, addressing the completion of the Mishkan. And each one of these 3 midrashim presents a different idea about endings, a different theme. The first theme of the first midrash tells us that often endings in life are painful. The second midrash tells us that endings offer us opportunities to connect with community in new ways. And the third theme, and I think that this is actually the hardest theme, is that endings are also times of hope and promise and transformation. The first midrash that I want to present speaks to the gravity, to the seriousness of endings. Every single person in this room knows how hard endings can be. that despite our best efforts, despite of our thoughts, our planning, our intentions, often we go into moments of transition, and that ending, that conclusion, leaves us speechless. This reality is exemplified in the Midrash, which tells us there was woe, there was sadness, the day that Moses completed setting up the tabernacle. Endings are hard, partly because we don't know what's going to come next. Endings fill us with uncertainty, with ambiguity. We don't know what's to happen next. And this point is made by the Midrash. God says in the Midrash, "Woe that the tabernacle was completed, for as long as my children were busy with the tabernacle, they did not complain." It's very Jewish. They were working together, says God, they were engaged, but now that the work is completed, they may no longer be unified. Even God is worried about what will happen next. Even God is worried about that transition to the unknown. The people have been working together, they've been collaborating, and the question remains, what will happen next? So endings are often fraught, and we often don't know what's going to come next. But this Midrash also recognizes the importance and the power of community in times of completion. A point that is further explored by the next Midrash I want to look at, one from a collection, Midrash Tanhuma, a 5th century collection of rabbinic teachings. In this Midrash, we are told that when the tabernacle was nearing completion, the Israelites brought before Moses all of the different, disparate, partially assembled pieces of the tabernacle. They brought him pieces of wood, they brought him metal poles, ritual objects, tapestries, and they dumped it in front of him like a set of Lincoln logs and said, "Here, assemble it." And the Midrash tells us that because the Mishkan was intended to be a communal act, and because Moses had not yet had a chance to take part in its construction, God reserved the final part for Moses. The only problem is that these are very heavy planks of wood. And Moses says this. He points out how heavy they are. And he says to the Holy One, and blessed be God, how is it possible for a single person to erect the tabernacle? How is it possible for a single person to erect the tabernacle? Picture an Amish barn building. Right? It wouldn't work with just one person. We have to work together. One person cannot do it alone. In order to make something great, we have to work together. And the Mishkan itself offers us this idea of community. For the Mishkan was something that everyone had to contribute to. The Mishkan was built by all of the people coming together and collaborating. This emphasis that's embedded in the idea of the Mishkan is ultimately what allows us to create spaces where God can be brought in. It's through the act of the people working together that they make a space where God can exist. And this profound symbol, perhaps the greatest symbol in all the Torah for community of the Mishkan, is embedded in this Midrash as well. That through community and through God, we can find new possibilities, even in endings. Death is an ending, but it's also a beginning. I have thought a great deal about the question of where God was when I sat in that hospital room in Los Angeles and watched my father die. And I don't have an answer to that. But I know where God was afterwards. God was there in the nurses who gave me a hug. God was there in the family and friends that supported us during Shiva. God was there in all the love that we have received since then. And I think that it's not a coincidence that in traditional Jewish law, it's dictated that we need community in order to properly mourn. In order to say the mourner's Kaddish, the memorial prayer, we are required to have a minyan. We are required to surround ourselves with community. And there can be hope and there can be comfort in community. And in that hope and comfort, one can find new possibilities and new beginnings. Because endings are also new beginnings. And I mean it, I really think that this is the hardest part. To do this work, that when something ends, to recognize and see the openness that's being created. And I think there's something undeniably moving for me about the cyclical nature of the Torah reading, the fact that we read the same stories again and again and again, and the fact that tomorrow we will complete the book of Exodus, but that the next week we will start the book of Leviticus. And this week we also begin the new Hebrew month of Nisan, the month of Passover, the month of liberation, the month of redemption. So endings contain all of that. Endings contain beginnings as well. They bring with them the potential for change, for possibility. And the final midrash that I want to present brings up this idea as well. Towards the very end of this week's parsha, the very last line of chapter 39, we are told that after Moses saw the entire work of creation of the Mishkan, we are told that Moses blessed them. And despite the ambiguity of endings, the unknowns, the complications, everything that it brings up, the parsha is reminding us to bless. Our tradition teaches that we should bless over the good and over the bad. And that's asking a lot. But this midrash also brings up that same idea of blessing in this moment. But as is often the case, the Torah is laconic and does not tell us what the actual blessing was. It simply says, Moses blessed them. Fortunately, the rabbis in the midrash fill in those gaps and tell us the blessing that Moses gave to the people at this moment. I want to end by offering this same blessing to everyone here tonight. This blessing to all of us engaged in building our own tabernacles, in constructing our own homes, and a blessing of strength and courage as we deal with and address and confront the completions and endings in our own lives. Moses says, may it be God's will that the Shekhinah, that God's presence on this world, should rest in the work of your hands. And may the pleasantness of the Lord our God be upon us and upon the work of our hands all the days of our lives. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.